I stood at my office window in downtown Seattle, staring at the resignation letter on my laptop screen. The cursor blinked on the send button. One click, and 7 years of my life would vanish. My name is Marcus Webb, and I have spent the last 60 seconds making a choice that would either destroy my career or save what's left of my soul. The phone call with Elliot Pierce ended 60 seconds ago. His ultimatum still rang in my ears. Choose work or family. What's it going to be? I'd made my choice. But before I sent the letter, I decided to gather my personal files, client contacts, project notes, anything I'd need for what came next. As COO, I had access to the shared leadership folder where all strategic planning documents were stored. I opened the folder to back up my work. That's when I saw it. A document titled Executive Transition Plan, Q3 Implementation. I clicked it open. My blood went cold. The plan was dated 3 months ago, created by Elliot Pierce, reviewed by Vanessa Pierce and Howard Chen. Drew Pierce completes MBA in August. Marcus transition begins post-Kellerman closing. New structure, Drew Pierce as COO. Marcus Webb demoted to VP Strategic Accounts with reduced equity and standard non-compete enforcement. Salary adjustment for Marcus Webb, 40%. There was a note from Vanessa in the margin. Divorce filing prepared will be executed after the transition announcement to avoid complications. 3 months? They'd been planning this for 3 months. While I worked 12 hours a day for 6 days in a week building the Kellerman deal, Elliot and Vanessa were planning to hand everything I built to her younger brother, a kid who'd never worked a real day at the firm. My father died 2 days ago, and I asked for 4 days off to bury him. And Elliot threatened to destroy my career if I went. But they were going to destroy it anyway. They'd just been waiting for the right moment. I pressed send on my resignation letter. Then I drove north to Bellingham for my father's funeral. The church was packed. I sat between my mother, Linda, and my younger sister, Rachel, in the front pew. Rachel was 5 months pregnant, tears streaming down her face as the pastor spoke about our father, James Webb. After 42 years of teaching, thousands of students, a lifetime spent helping kids nobody else believed in. He is now gone. One by one, people stood to share memories. A doctor who'd been failing history until Dad tutored him every afternoon for free. A lawyer who said Dad was the only teacher who saw past her poverty and pushed her toward college. A software engineer who credited Dad with teaching him that intelligence came in different forms. The stories kept coming. 20 people spoke, then 30. The service ran an hour over schedule because nobody wanted to stop sharing how my father had changed their lives. I realized something sitting there. Dad had impacted more people in 42 years of teaching than I had in 7 years of corporate consulting. He'd built something real, something that mattered, and I'd missed most of his final 2 years because Elliot Pierce needed me in the office. After the service, I stood at the gravesite with my mother. She held my hand, her grip surprisingly strong for a 62-year-old woman who'd just buried her husband. "He was proud of you," she said quietly. "Even when you couldn't visit, he understood." "I should have been here more," I replied, my voice breaking. "Yes," she said simply. "You should have, but you're here now. That's what matters." Rachel joined us, her hand on her swollen belly. "The baby's kicking," she said softly. "I wish Dad could have met him." "What are you naming him?" I asked. "James," she answered. "After Dad." I looked at my father's casket being lowered into the ground. James Webb, history teacher, father. The man who taught me that character mattered more than career success. I'd forgotten that lesson somewhere along the way. But standing there at his grave, I remembered. Elliot Pierce had given me an ultimatum. He'd forced me to choose. I chose family. Now I was going to make him regret ever making me choose. 4 days later, I walked back into Pierce & Associates headquarters. Security was waiting at the elevator. "Mr. Webb, you need to come with us," the guard said. They escorted me to the main conference room. Elliot sat at the head of the table, Vanessa beside him. Howard Chen, the family attorney, sat across from them. Judith Martinez from HR occupied the far end, her expression carefully neutral. "Sit down, Marcus," Elliot said, his voice flat. I remained standing. "I'm fine here," I replied. "You made your choice," Elliot continued. "You walked away during the biggest acquisition in firm history. You abandoned your responsibilities. So we're terminating your employment for cause. No severance, no recommendations. Clean out your desk." I reached into my briefcase and pulled out a folder. I placed it on the conference table. "Before I leave, there's something you need to see," I said calmly. Elliot didn't touch it. "I'm not interested in your—" "Open it," I interrupted. Howard reached for the folder first. He opened it, began reading, and his face changed. He looked up at Elliot, then back down at the documents. "Elliot, you need to see this," Howard said quietly. I watched Elliot's expression as he flipped through the pages. Client contracts I'd built from scratch. Email records I'd kept meticulously for 7 years. Documentation showing that 73% of the firm's current revenue came from relationships I'd developed independently, not through the Pierce family network. "I spent the last 4 days thinking," I said. "My father taught me integrity. You taught me leverage. I learned both lessons." Vanessa stared at the documents, her face pale. "I'm not just the COO," I continued. "I'm the foundation holding this company together, and you're about to find out what happens when that foundation walks away." I turned toward the door, then stopped. "I'll be in touch about severance negotiations," I said, "through my attorney." I walked out of Pierce & Associates for the last time, leaving the folder behind. The real fight was just beginning. Before we continue, if you want more stories like Marcus's, hit subscribe and let me know where you're listening from in the comments. 1 week after walking out of Pierce & Associates, I sat in a small law office in downtown Seattle, across from Miranda Foster. She was 44, sharp-eyed, and came highly recommended by a friend who'd gone through an executive dispute 3 years earlier. Her office was modest. No leather furniture or floor-to-ceiling windows like Elliot's firm, just organized bookshelves, a simple desk, and walls covered with framed thank you letters from clients. "Before we discuss fees, I need to tell you something," Miranda said, leaning forward. "Your father was my daughter's teacher. 15 years ago, Emma got seriously ill, missed 6 months of school. We thought she'd have to repeat the year. James stayed after school every single day for those 6 months, tutoring her for free, helping her catch up. She graduated on time because of him." "I didn't know," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. "Most people didn't. That's who your father was." She opened the folder I brought. "Now let's make sure his son gets the justice he deserves." For the next hour, Miranda reviewed every document I'd compiled over 7 years. Client contracts, email chains, commission structures. Her expression shifted from professional interest to genuine shock. "Marcus, what you have here isn't just leverage for severance," she said finally. "This is evidence of systematic fraud." I sat up straighter. "What do you mean?" I asked. She pulled out 3 specific contracts, laying them side by side. Look at these. You brought in Data Sync Solutions, Westfield Manufacturing, and Cornerstone Analytics. All three contracts show you as the primary relationship manager. But the commission payments didn't go through the standard firm structure. They went through a separate LLC called Pierce Consulting Ventures. I never heard of that company, I said. Exactly. Miranda pulled up corporate registration documents on her laptop. Pierce Consulting Ventures is owned personally by Elliot and Vanessa Pierce. They've been using your client relationships to funnel lucrative side deals through their private company, avoiding the profit-sharing structure that would have paid you and other senior employees substantial commissions. Over 7 years, this diverted approximately $3.8 million. The number hit me like cold water. $3.8 million. That should have been distributed to senior staff based on the employee agreement you signed, Miranda answered. Instead, Elliot structured deals so the most profitable consulting work went through his private LLC. You did the work. He took the profit. It's not just unethical, Marcus. It's fraud. I stared at the documents, my mind racing. 7 years of 12-hour-a-day, missing my father's chemotherapy appointments, skipping family holidays, and Elliot had been stealing from me the entire time. What do we do? I asked. Miranda closed the folder. We have options. File a lawsuit and make this public, or use it as leverage in settlement negotiations. But before we decide, I'd recommend gathering any additional evidence you can access. I thought for a moment. I kept backup copies of everything. Email archives, client files, meeting notes. It's all on a personal external drive. Good. Get me everything. We're going to need it. 2 weeks after my resignation, I was in my apartment sorting through my father's belongings when Rachel called. I've been cleaning out Dad's study, she said. Found something weird. A lockbox in the back of his closet. It was locked, but I found the key taped under his desk drawer. What's inside? I asked. Old letters, lots of them. They're addressed to someone named Jonathan Kellerman Sr. My pulse quickened. Kellerman? Are you sure? Yeah. Dad and this Kellerman guy were teaching colleagues back in the 1980s. There are thank you letters here too from Kellerman's son. Someone named Jonathan Jr. Does that matter? It mattered more than Rachel realized. Jonathan Kellerman Jr. was the CEO of Kellerman Industries, the same company at the center of the $12 million acquisition Elliot had threatened to destroy me over. Rachel, I'm coming over, I said. Don't move anything. An hour later, I sat in my childhood home reading letters my father had kept for decades. The story they told changed everything. Jonathan Kellerman Sr. had been a history teacher alongside my father in Bellingham during the early 1980s. His son, Jonathan Jr., had been struggling badly in school, failing multiple classes, facing the possibility of not graduating. My father had tutored the kid for an entire year, staying late every Tuesday and Thursday, helping him pass his classes and graduate. The thank you letters from young Jonathan were heartfelt. Mr. Webb, my dad said you saved my future. I'm going to make you both proud someday. Years later, Kellerman Sr. left teaching to start a business. That business became Kellerman Industries, and Jonathan Jr. eventually took over as CEO. The most recent letter was dated just 8 months ago. My father had written to Jonathan Jr., mentioning in passing that his son worked in consulting, helping companies grow. Jonathan's response was warm. James, if your son is anything like you, he's someone I'd want to work with. If our paths ever cross in business, I'll make sure to remember everything you taught me about recognizing real value in people. I pulled out my phone and searched for Jonathan Kellerman Jr.'s direct email. It took some digging through LinkedIn, but I found it. I wrote a simple message. Mr. Kellerman, my name is Marcus Webb. I'm James Webb's son. I recently left Pearson Associates. I believe we should talk about the Kellerman acquisition and about what my father would have wanted his legacy to represent. Would you be available for a private meeting? I hit send before I could second-guess myself. The response came in less than 10 minutes. Marcus, I've been trying to reach you since I heard about your departure. Yes, let's meet. Tomorrow, 2 p.m., Salish Lodge. Just the two of us. There are things about this acquisition you need to know. I called Miranda immediately. We need to move fast, I said. I think the Kellerman deal was never really about Pierce and Associates. What do you mean? She asked. I mean, Elliot's entire empire might be built on a lie, and I'm about to prove it. The Salish Lodge sat an hour east of Seattle, overlooking Snoqualmie Falls. I arrived 15 minutes early, nervous in a way I hadn't felt since my first client pitch 7 years ago. This wasn't just a business meeting. This was about making up for all the years I have wasted, and potentially about dismantling everything Elliot Pierce had built. Jonathan Kellerman Jr. walked in at exactly 2 p.m. He was 58, tall, with gray hair and the kind of presence that came from decades of leading a successful company. But when he saw me, his expression softened immediately. Marcus, he said, extending his hand. I'm so sorry about your father. I only found out last week. Thank you, I replied, shaking his hand. I appreciate you meeting with me. We sat at a private table away from other guests. Jonathan ordered coffee for both of us, then leaned back in his chair. Your father saved my life, he said quietly. I don't mean that figuratively. I was 16, failing out of school. My dad was furious, threatening military school, talking about how I was wasting my potential. I wasn't stupid. I just learned differently. But nobody saw that except James Webb. I listened, not interrupting. He stayed every Tuesday and Thursday for an entire year, tutoring me for free. Jonathan continued. Never made me feel dumb, just helped me understand history in ways that made sense to me. I graduated because of him. When my father started Kellerman Industries years later, he always said the best investment he ever made was being friends with a man who saw value in people others had written off. My dad never mentioned it, I said. That's because your father didn't do things for recognition. He did them because they were right. Jonathan took a sip of coffee. When your name came up on the Pearson Associates team for our acquisition, I did some research. James Webb's son, Harvard MBA, building a reputation for ethical consulting. I told my board that was the kind of person I wanted leading our integration. My stomach dropped. The acquisition was about me? The entire $12 million deal was built on your father's reputation and your track record, Jonathan answered. Not Elliot Pierce's network. I wanted to work with you specifically, Marcus. That's why I insisted you lead negotiations. I sat back, processing this. Does Elliot know? I never told him explicitly. I assumed he understood you were the key relationship. Jonathan's expression hardened. Then I heard about what happened. You asking for bereavement leave, him denying it, you resigning. I've been stalling the acquisition ever since. Stalling it? I asked. The deal hasn't moved forward in 2 weeks. My team keeps citing internal review processes. But the truth is, I'm not moving forward with Pierce and Associates if you're not involved. Your father taught me that business is about people and integrity. Elliot Pierce demonstrated he has neither. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed. A text from Miranda. Call me immediately. Major development. I need to make a quick call. I said to Jonathan. "It's my attorney." "Take your time," he replied. I stepped outside and dialed Miranda. "3 clients just contacted me," she said without preamble. Data Sync Solutions, Westfield Manufacturing, and Patricia Morgan's cybersecurity startup, all asking where you're going and whether they can move their business to you. "They can't," I answered. "I signed a non-compete." "Those non-competes are legally unenforceable given the circumstances of your termination. I've reviewed the case law. You're clear to accept them." She paused. "Marcus, these 3 clients alone represent $4.2 million in annual recurring revenue. If they leave Pierce & Associates, Elliott's firm loses 1/3 of its client base in 1 quarter. My mind raced through the implications. "What else?" I asked. "Elliott's Golden Boy just crashed and burned. Drew Pierce had his first solo client presentation this morning with Patricia Morgan. She walked out halfway through, called him unprepared and arrogant. Then she emailed you directly asking if you'd consider independent consulting." I felt something shift in my chest. Not triumph, but clarity. This wasn't about revenge. This was about the natural consequences of Elliott's choices finally catching up to him. "There's one more thing," Miranda continued. "My team found something else in the financial documents. Remember that shadow LLC we discovered? We traced the payment routing. Elliott wasn't just diverting your commissions. He was diverting profit sharing from 6 other senior employees over the past decade. The total amount is closer to $7 million, not $3.8 million. $7 million? I repeated. $7 million that should have been distributed according to the employee partnership agreements everyone signed. He structured the fraud carefully, but it's documented in corporate filings that don't match tax returns. Marcus, this isn't just grounds for a civil lawsuit. This could trigger criminal fraud charges if the SEC gets involved." I looked back through the window at Jonathan Kellerman, sitting patiently at our table. "Set up a formal mediation," I said to Miranda. "All parties present, Elliott, Vanessa, their attorney. Let them see the full evidence. Give them one chance to settle this quietly before we go public." "And if they refuse?" she asked. "Then we file suit and let the industry know exactly who Elliott Pierce really is," I replied. "My father spent his life teaching that character matters. Elliott's about to learn that lesson the hard way." I hung up and returned to the table. Jonathan looked at me expectantly. "I have a proposition," I said. "What if the Kellerman acquisition moved forward, not with Pierce & Associates, but with me as an independent consultant?" Jonathan smiled for the first time since we sat down. "I was hoping you'd say that. Let's talk terms." By the time I left Salish Lodge 2 hours later, I had my first major client contract as an independent consultant. $6 million over 18 months. And Elliott Pierce had no idea his entire empire was about to collapse. The mediation took place in a neutral law office conference room 3 weeks after my resignation. The space was deliberately impersonal. Gray walls, a long table, uncomfortable chairs designed to encourage quick resolutions. I arrived with Miranda at 9 a.m. sharp. Elliott was already there with Vanessa, Howard Chen, and a professional mediator named Robert Kim. Robert was in his mid-50s, with the patient demeanor of someone who'd spent decades watching people fight over money and principle. "Thank you all for coming," Robert began. "We're here to discuss the terms of Mr. Webb's departure from Pierce & Associates, and—" "There are no terms to discuss," Elliott interrupted, his voice hard. "Marcus abandoned his position during a critical business period. He's entitled to nothing. We're here as a courtesy." Miranda placed her briefcase on the table and opened it slowly. "Mr. Pierce, before we proceed, there are some documents you should review." She slid a folder across to Howard first, deliberately bypassing Elliot. Howard opened it and began reading. I watched his face change. Confusion, then recognition, then something close to fear. He looked up at Elliot, then back down at the papers. Howard's shock was genuine. Elliot had clearly kept this from his own attorney. Elliot, you need to see this, Howard said quietly. I'm not interested in whatever. Now, Howard insisted, his tone sharp. Elliot took the folder. The first page was a corporate registration document for Pierce Consulting Ventures, LLC. The second page showed ownership structure. Elliot Pierce, 60%, Vanessa Pierce, 40%. The third page listed diverted client payments over 7 years. Vanessa leaned over to read. Her face went pale. This is the shadow company you've been operating, Miranda said calmly. Marcus brought in clients through Pierce & Associates, but you funneled the most profitable consulting work through your private LLC. The profit-sharing agreements Marcus and other senior employees signed entitled them to commission percentages. You avoided those payments by restructuring deals through Pierce Consulting Ventures. That's a completely legal corporate structure, Elliot said, but his voice lacked conviction. It would be, Miranda replied, if you'd disclosed it properly in corporate filings and tax returns. But you didn't. The discrepancy between what Pierce & Associates reported and what Pierce Consulting Ventures actually earned constitutes fraud. Over 7 years, you diverted approximately $7 million that should have been distributed to senior staff. Howard closed his eyes briefly. Elliot, we need to talk privately. No private conversations, I said, speaking for the first time. Everything happens here, now transparently. Elliot's jaw clenched. He stared at me across the table. You want to destroy what I built because you couldn't handle the pressure of... I gave you 7 years, I interrupted, my voice steady. Missed my father's chemotherapy appointments, skipped family holidays, sacrificed my marriage, though honestly, that might be the only good thing to come out of this. Vanessa flinched but said nothing. You told me family businesses require sacrifice, I continued. You were right, but you sacrificed my family for your empire, for your legacy. And when I finally chose my own father over your company, you tried to destroy me for it. You walked away during the Kellerman acquisition, Elliot shot back. The Kellerman acquisition you were planning to cut me out of anyway, I replied. I pulled out my phone and showed him the forwarded email chain, the Marcus transition plan. 3 months. You and Vanessa spent 3 months planning to phase me out and hand my position to Drew. Did you really think I wouldn't find out? Howard looked at Elliot sharply. You didn't tell me about this. It was an internal family matter, Elliot said. No, Miranda interjected. It was a coordinated plan to terminate Marcus after securing the value of his client relationships, which, combined with the fraud evidence, constitutes both constructive dismissal and wrongful termination. She placed another document on the table. Your non-compete clause is unenforceable. Denying bereavement leave for a parent's funeral constitutes retaliatory termination. The clients Marcus is currently working with approached him independently. He didn't solicit them. What clients? Elliot demanded. DataSync Solutions, Westfield Manufacturing, and Patricia Morgan's startup have all moved their business to Marcus as an independent consultant. That's $4.2 million in annual revenue that just left your firm, Miranda answered. And Jonathan Kellerman has made it clear the acquisition only proceeds if Marcus leads the integration. As an independent contractor, not a Pierce employee. Elliot's face flushed red. You can't. He already has, Miranda said. The Question now is whether Pierce & Associates survives the legal and reputational damage when this fraud becomes public. Because I promise you, Mr. Pierce, every consulting firm in this industry will know what you did. Howard stood abruptly. We're taking a break. Elliot, Vanessa, outside. Now. They left the room. Robert Kim looked at me and Miranda. That was effective, he said neutrally. It was true, I replied. 20 minutes later, they returned. Howard spoke first. We're prepared to discuss settlement terms. The negotiation took another 3 hours. Coffee went cold. Voices rose and fell. But eventually, terms emerged. $2.1 million. The number represented unpaid commissions, severance, and damages for wrongful termination. All non-compete clauses voided immediately. Pierce & Associates would issue a public statement praising my contributions and wishing me well in my independent consulting venture. The Kellerman acquisition would proceed with me as an independent consultant, not a Pierce employee. Elliot signed the documents without speaking, his hand moving mechanically across the pages. Vanessa wouldn't meet my eyes. Howard looked relieved it was over. As we prepared to leave, I stopped at the door and turned back to Elliot one final time. You gave me an ultimatum, I said. Choose work or family. I chose family. And because of that choice, I'm building something my father would actually be proud of. You should try it sometime. I walked out with Miranda, leaving Elliot Pierce sitting in silence, his empire crumbling around him. The fight was over, but the real victory was just beginning. 3 months after the settlement, I stood in a small office in Bellingham, looking out at the view of Bellingham Bay. This was home now, close to my mother, close to Rachel, who was now 8 months pregnant and needed family nearby. Web Consulting Group. That's what I named it. Simple, honest, built on my own reputation, not someone else's empire. My first client was Kellerman Industries, $6 million over 18 months for acquisition integration consulting. Jonathan kept his word. My second client was Patricia Morgan's cybersecurity startup. She'd called me the day after the settlement closed, saying she'd rather work with someone who valued integrity over convenience. My third and fourth clients were Data Sync Solutions and Westfield Manufacturing, both following me from Pierce & Associates. Within 90 days, my contracted annual revenue exceeded what I'd earned at Pierce & Associates. But this time, every dollar was mine. No shadow LLCs, no profit diversion. Just honest work, fairly compensated. I hired 3 consultants, young professionals who'd reached out after hearing about my departure. People tired of corporate politics who wanted to do meaningful work. I structured the company differently than Elliot had. Transparent profit sharing, mandatory bereavement leave, no questions asked, and a firm rule: no client meetings before 8 a.m. or after 6 p.m. Work-life balance wasn't a corporate slogan. It was company culture. Every Sunday, I visited my father's grave. This particular Sunday, I brought coffee, the cheap diner kind Dad always preferred. You were right, Dad, I said, sitting on the grass beside his headstone. Character is built when doing the right thing costs you everything. But it turns out integrity is also the best business strategy. Who knew? The wind rustled through the trees. I imagined him smiling at that. Rachel's naming the baby James, I continued. After you. He's due in 3 weeks. I'll be there for the birth. No emergency client calls, no last-minute crises, just family. Meanwhile, 60 miles south, Pierce & Associates was collapsing in slow motion. The Kellerman deal had closed, but without my continued involvement, the integration consulting phase went to Web Consulting Group, not Pierce & Associates. That was another 1.8 million in revenue Elliot had been counting on. 4 more major clients departed over the next 2 months. Not because I recruited them. I didn't have to. Drew Pierce's incompetence and Elliot's aggressive sales tactics drove them away naturally. The firm's annual revenue dropped 31% in a single quarter. Industry reputation took an even harder hit. Word of the settlement spread. Details remained confidential, but the settlement's existence became known. The consulting community is small. People talk. The whispers grew louder. Pierce denied bereavement leave, forced out his top performer, got hit with a major settlement. Nobody wanted to work there anymore. Recruiting became impossible. Every promising MBA candidate who interviewed asked the same questions. Is it true about the bereavement leave denial? Is the work culture really that demanding? Elliot tried damage control, but his explanations sounded hollow. It was a misunderstanding, doesn't repair a reputation built on ruthlessness. The financial pressure mounted. Elliot took out a substantial business loan to cover operating costs and the settlement payment. Interest payments ate into already declining profits. Vanessa filed for divorce, from me finally making official what had been dead for years, but the proceeding revealed her knowledge of Pierce Consulting Ventures and the fraud scheme. Her reputation in the industry suffered as collateral damage. 6 months later, she took a position at a smaller firm in Portland, effectively exiled from Seattle's consulting scene. Drew returned to business school, admitting he wasn't ready for leadership. The position Elliot had promised him evaporated along with the firm's growth trajectory. Howard Chen, the family attorney who'd represented the Pierces for 20 years, quietly retired early. He told a mutual acquaintance he couldn't continue representing practices he found ethically compromised. 5 months after I launched Web Consulting Group, Rachel gave birth to a healthy baby boy. I was in the delivery room, holding my sister's hand, watching my nephew enter the world. James Webb, Jr. Named after the man who taught us both that family mattered more than career success. Holding that baby in the hospital, I thought about legacy, real legacy. My father had influenced hundreds of lives over 42 years of teaching. He'd built something that outlasted quarterly earnings reports or acquisition deals. He'd changed people, not profit margins. I was trying to do the same, just in a different arena. Consulting that helped businesses grow sustainably. Treating employees like human beings instead of assets. Proving that ethical practices and profitability weren't opposites. They were partners. Jonathan Kellerman became more than a client. He became a friend, someone who understood what it meant to honor a parent's memory through how you conducted business. Together, we created a scholarship fund in James Webb's name, supporting children of teachers pursuing business degrees, bridging the gap between education and commerce. 1 year after my father's funeral, I stood at his grave again. This time, my mother and Rachel came with me. Rachel held baby James, who was now 6 months old and curious about everything. I finally understand what you were teaching me, Dad, I said quietly. Success isn't about how much you accumulate or how high you climb. It's about whether you can look at yourself honestly and respect the person staring back. My mother squeezed my hand. He knows, she said, and he's proud. Web Consulting Group was thriving, not Fortune 500 level, but sustainable, ethical, and profitable. My team loved their work. My clients respected me. My family was close. I'd even started dating again. A project manager I'd met through Patricia Morgan's company. Someone who understood ambition but valued balance. I looked down at my nephew, sleeping peacefully in Rachel's arms. You're going to grow up hearing stories about your grandfather, I told him. About integrity and character and choosing family. And when you're old enough, I'll tell you about the time I had to choose between work and family, and how choosing family turned out to be the best business decision I ever made. If this story resonates with you and you want more like this, hit subscribe. And do me a favor, comment below and tell me where you're listening from. Are you commuting? Working out? Relaxing at home? I'd love to know.